Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday Featured Artist Lecture Series. We'll begin the program in approximately 5 minutes. If you are going to have a seat in the house, please make your way towards Shermer Meeting Hall. Thank you.
The treble was turned all the way down in the cafe, so I turned it up and when it did, but yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Thursday Featured Artist Lecture Series. Our program will begin in just a minute or two, so please take your seats. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to try to start, if everybody can take their seats. I'm Sue Hostetler. I'm the vice chair of the ranch, and I run the summer lecture series. And I just want to thank you all for coming today. It's been an amazing summer of programming. Today's talk is part of the ranch's ongoing series of conversations with artists, reflecting the ranch's commitment to being a destination not only for art making, but also for discourse from across unique perspectives. As always, the opinions expressed are those of the participating individuals, and we welcome you to join the conversation. On behalf of the ranch, I would like to thank everyone, all of you for coming, all of you on the National Council, and maybe most Toby Lewis, who is our presenting sponsor. Before you leave the campus today, you might go up to the gallery. We have our annual auction this Saturday, and there are some amazing pieces for auction. So if you have any interest, stop by. Today in particular will be quite a treat as we have with us one of the foremost writers on the contemporary art world, Sarah Thornton, as well as two esteemed artists and a leading gallerist, all of whom will be introduced by Sarah. Before passing the microphone to Sarah, I would like to briefly list some of her accolades. She's written for me. She is so brilliant. She holds a doctorate degree in sociology. And the best is she was described by the Washington Post as the Jane Goodall of the art world. You probably know her books, the seminal work, 7 Days in the Art World, which is fabulous if you haven't read it, and also her latest book, 33 Artists in 3 Acts. They are both for sale outside, and she will sign them. Now please join me in welcoming Sarah Thornton, who will introduce the panelists in the talk today. Sisters on Top, Art World Professionals talk about Islam, immigration, and ingenuity.
It's not on. Oh, not on. Okay, hello, can you hear me? Excellent. Thank you so much, Sue, and thank you to Nancy and Ashley Toady for organizing this. And I'm only going to introduce the artists in brief, partly because this wonderfully professional organization has got really great long bios on the artists in their summer series brochure. But on my immediate left is Diana Al-Hadid, born in Aleppo, Syria, raised in Ohio, now lives in Brooklyn. She's won many awards and has had many solo shows, particularly in university museums, from the Hammer in UCLA all the way to NYU Abu Dhabi, with a lot of prestigious university museums in between. She's also in the collections of many museums. To her left is Huma Baba, who was born in Karachi, Pakistan, and moved to the USA to go to the Rhode Island School of Design. She now lives in Poughkeepsie, New York. She's also won many awards and prizes and had solo shows in many different American institutions, including PS1, MoMA PS1, and the Aspen Art Museum. She had one of the most notable rooms in Auqui and Wazor's Venice Biennale 2 years ago. She's also been in the Whitney Biennial, the Gwangju Biennial, and many international triennials. And then on her left is Layla Heller. Now, were you born in Tehran?
Yes,
And the last time you were in Iran was 1978?
1978.
All right, when the Shah was ousted from power. The most important thing to know about Layla is she has a terrific gallery in New York. And since 2005, she's also had the largest commercial gallery in... 2015. 2015, she's had the largest gallery in the United Arab Emirates, the largest commercial gallery. She went to Brown University, the Sotheby's Institute, and George Washington University. She's worked at the Hirshhorn and the Guggenheim before she opened her gallery in 1982. So for more information, please consult the brochure or the web. Let's see, Sisters on Top. I've been queried about the title of this panel, including a journalist in Abu Dhabi. And the reason, there is no innuendo whatsoever in that title. It is simply that we're on top of a mountain. We're at very high altitude, and that is why it's called Sisters on Top. Now,
Love it.
Now, it may be hard for us to consider, but not everyone believes in contemporary art. And for those of us that do, the belief system can be a religion of sorts. It's a way of thinking, a source of values, a source of community, one that punctuates art world participants' annual calendar, where different religious groups might have Christmas, Yom Kippur, or Ramadan, so art worlders have Basel, the Dubai Art Fair, the Whitney, the Venice Biennial, Sharjah Biennial, and of course this week, it's the first week of August, so I must be in Aspen. I interviewed a couple of Iranian artists a few years ago called Ramin and Rokhni Harazadeh, and they told me that the general perception of contemporary artists in Iran is that they are insane or atheists or insane atheists. Among Islamic fundamentalist regimes, it is considered better to repeat the wisdom of the past than to display originality, or that's at least what the Harazides told me. And as they put it, creation is for God. Now, obviously, there are many different nuances between different nations with predominantly Muslim populations, but to the panelists, and jump in as you see fit, what springs to mind about the similarities and differences between Islam and contemporary art ideology? Huma! What do you think?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, in the way that you would expect me to. All I can do is respond to what you have, quoted those two other artists mentioning.
Yeah.
I tend to look at it from a different point of view. Basically, if you take, for example, the films of Abbas Kiarostami, who was an amazing film director, who made films in a period when there were many restrictions.
From
as
which
to what
nation? From where was he?
He's Iranian.
Yep, okay.
And he worked within the confines and restrictions that the government imposed, and yet he produced amazing results. So I think that that's kind of, for me, I don't want to think that way, what you quoted before, because I think it's the job of the artist then to figure out how can I go around this. And this is not the first time. I mean, all through history, there have been people that have commissioned, and then if the artist goes against that, they don't like it, so then you have to make changes. So, I mean, that's what I would say. And also, I don't like to use religion because I'm not particularly religious. I mean, I'm not religious, but I don't like to, talk about it in that way. I stay away from it, frankly. It's not something that I'm interested in including in my work. So I think, each person, you have to respect other people's beliefs.
Of course. So, Diana, did you have any thoughts about the relationship?
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, I likewise don't consider myself, I'm not a practicing religious person. I was raised Muslim, so of course I know all about it. I mean, as much as the average Muslim, I think. I know how to pray, I know about fasting, I know the pillars. I can, recite Quran, but I'm not, I'm probably like, you say Christmas Christians, I might be like one notch below that even. I'm not even like doing occasional Ramadan or anything, or Eids. So in full disclosure, I found that, and again, I'm happy to respect everyone's religious beliefs, and I'm considered Muslim when I go to a Muslim country because my family's Muslim, right? So the same way that if you're born to a Jewish mother, you're Jewish, right? So and I respect the traditions and the cultures, but I personally don't practice any religion. So as full disclosure, but I think because of how I grew up in sort of, I grew up in Ohio, as you mentioned, but with a real sense of difference between like my American culture and my Muslim Arabic household, which was quite a bubble. So I'm sure, I'm confident that a lot of my curiosities stem from that very old conflict. But I found them incompatible personally. I can't, because in a lot of ways, I think you have to feel like you cannot censor yourself if you want to be an artist, a certain kind of artist at least. But people who live in Islamic countries certainly have to find ways to work around that system. So who knows how they, are able to do it. And of course, a lot of times these restrictions and restraints produce good art, right? Like in the same way that other restrictions and restraints like financial, economic, spatial, like all these other things in the world, sometimes make you very creative. So you have to dig a little deeper sometimes in looking at what appears to be kind of typical, like state-approved Islamic art, right? Maybe there's more going on.
Can I just ask you a quick question about the work on the right called Spun of the Limits of My Lonely Walls? Now, this is an upside-down cathedral, and I'm wondering, would
dig a little deeper on that.
would you ever do an upside-down mosque?
I mean, I think that phase of my life has passed, but I didn't, see, this is the thing that, okay, so remember that every work that an artist makes is part of a bigger arc, right? So this work were new to me, and I was looking at them as an artist, so as an insider, and as an outsider, because I never went to a church service. But I was taken by the religiosity, despite my lack of belief, and I found you so a lot of people who are like, maybe the square is not, I was not comfortable kind of convert. So to me that felt or
I want to just start to say that the discos, I mean, who cared about the discotheques in Paris or London or south of France or anywhere? It was a very different life. And the Shah kept more and more trying to bring us back to our anything. Everything looked like a uniform. The body had disappeared. She looked at it in two ways. One was like these women were wearing these black chadors and were holding guns, and they were with the military, trying to show that they're equal to men, so they felt being in this garb made them equal to men rather than being judged by their bodies and their sexuality. So, yet Shireen feels that actually made them more sexual because you started thinking, oh, what is underneath the body? And so it was a twofold sort of meaning. Also, she started using the henna or the writing or the tattooing on her works by writing, and she used the first group of poems that she used were by Farooq Farrokhzad, a very radical poet who during the Shah was kept being warned to, a little, calm down and not be so active. But she was really talking so much sexuality. America those days would be too Puritan to endure that, sexuality that she talked about. I mean, the Iran that I grew up in is where Robert Wilson, who was not accepted in America, that's why he moved to Paris, because he felt Americans were too Puritan, did all the nude performances in Iran. So it was a very different place. And then, I went to university, and I was supposed to study economics at Brown. I supposedly go back, run one of, my father's bank or whatever, very much like that. And when I discovered this amazing teacher, Kermit Champa, who, was a specialist on Monet and on Mondrian, I absolutely was mesmerized. I switched my degree, and my father said, "What? You're so smart. Why would you want to go in art?" My mother pushed me, though, and said, "Go and do what you want to do." That's one of the things we'll talk later, but I find Iranian or Middle Eastern mothers are very empowering and give you a lot of strength in.
If you'd been a boy, would your father have put even more pressure on you to stick with economics?
Yes, and not art.
Yeah.
So definitely. But my father was very open-minded. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but when I was 16, he said, okay, now we're going to go look at American colleges. Now, I want to tell you, just don't go and sleep around with people. It's a special thing. You got to be very choosy. My mother had a heart attack. And why are you encouraging her? So, you know, so it was not this Islamic. You know, I have learned about Islam by being in Dubai in the last 12, 13 years.
Yes.
And I, you know, have learned about the culture. I've learned about Ramadan. I learned about women. But I admire these women in the Middle East, especially in Dubai, in Qatar, in Bahrain. Especially in the art world, every initiative in the arts in the UAE or around the Gulf is by, you know, like it's a women-driven thing. And that's very important. Like in Dubai, in Dubai it's Sheikh Manal, in Abu Dhabi it's Sheikh Salama, in Bahrain it's Sheikh Hamai, in Sheikh Mayasa,
All the
and whatever.
princesses.
So no, that's where it starts.
Yeah.
They give the funding. They send their students to RISD free. They send them to Yale for free. They do all of that to women artists to learn to, and also curatorial studies that they very much back in a big way. All the gallerists are women. A lot of the artists are women. I feel very empowered more in Dubai as a woman than I do in New York. I really mean it, as a gallerist, and not in other ways, but as a gallerist, I feel that-
It's very much considered a woman's world, isn't
It
it? The
is.
art world, and the men absent themselves to a large extent. A lot of the receptions are women only, and it has to do with the segregation of the culture there. When I was last in the Emirates, I interviewed a handful of Emirati women artists, all of whom wore an abaya, or the veil, as you know we say in America, and they said it was, you know, they'd been encouraged to become artists. But their brothers weren't really allowed to be artists. They had to be architects if they were so inclined. Tell me, Huma and Diana, how, did you have pressures or encouragement with regard to becoming an artist that you felt were gendered in any way?
I'd just like to point out, when you're talking about the United Arab Emirates, which does not have a very long history, and you're talking about like Arab countries, which are the newer ones, they are much more conservative and actually control their population very strongly. I come from a different, I'm not Middle Eastern, I'm from the Indian subcontinent, so, and you're from Iraq. These are older, and you're from Iran, which is
From Syria.
much, I mean, they're all like ancient cultures. So that kind of conservatism never existed, whether it be, usually you find conservatism, as in here too, in the middle class. They are the most conservative always. And the poor people are not, and the super rich are not, you know, that's the difference. So I just wanted to make clear that, you know, when you talk about the Muslim world, it's like a,
Very,
there's
very.
Indonesia, I mean, you know, there's Bangladesh, there's all these other places, plus where the three of us come from. So we don't come from that culture, which is actually where you, in Pakistan, you don't have to wear anything. I mean, you know, you can go as you like. I mean, obviously, in these cultures, it's never been encouraged that, you know, you show too much skin, you know, because obviously it's not good. I mean, if something happens to you. So, and what you mentioned before, that, you know, the seduction of being covered is far more sexy than, you know, basically exposing yourself completely. I mean, that's how I've heard about it. And I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, not all of the Muslim world is like Saudi Arabia, which is a place where they suppress everybody, whether it be man, woman, you know,
But can I ask, because your work on the right, and you've made a lot of totems of this kind. This one happens to be in bronze. One might have seen ones in cork or other materials. The gender figures very highly in their content. Could you tell us a little bit about your representation of gender in these works?
Well, most of my figures are hermaphrodites, because that's what I have always been interested in. And in my culture, the hermaphrodite goes back thousands of years. So there used to be harems, which were where the women, lived separately, and the eunuchs protected them. So, and then I remember growing up right near my house, there was a Pathan community. The Pathans are from the north of Pakistan, and they usually, during their weddings and things, there's segregation. I was never brought up like that. But so we used to climb up on the wall when they used to have their wedding celebrations. So the men would be outside, and there'd be music, and there'd be dancing, because the men dance this beautiful dance. And then there would be, transvestites, because the women are not allowed to join the men. So it was very common, so to see that. And if you drive around Karachi, if you stop at a traffic light, the transvestite will come up to you, pretty ugly, but to beg for money, But there's a whole community of it, of them. So, it's something that I grew up with, So, and also in terms of art history, I've always been interested in, those kind of, these things evolve as you're working, So I'm not thinking about them in terms of like, well, this is what these are things that I just want to do. These are things that I'm attracted to. Or if you go back in history, and my interest in, like when you mentioned earlier that, in Islam, especially in the Arab countries, the newer Arab countries, because their culture doesn't go back that far. For me, I look back at the culture, at my culture, not at the religion, And the cultures go back thousands of years, And you can see art forms, whether it be in sculpture or wall, cave painting or stuff like that. These things have existed much longer, and that's what I'm more interested in. So.
Diana, do you see your forms as at all gendered? One could say many of them have a very masculine sense of scale, but perhaps a more feminine sense of fragility, if that's not too stereotypical. I don't know. Do you see them? Do you have associations?
I don't consciously think about that when I'm making something. I don't really consciously think about, it's kind of like heavy metaphors when I'm building. Mm-hmm. I'm really thinking much more, maybe intimate. I don't know if it's more intimately or more broadly, just about form and the nuts and bolts and the weight of a material and these other concerns. I'm not really thinking of like message first, mm-hmm. But surely these things eke out by the end. So when I was actually this was a strange, but I think very pivotal piece for me, the one on the left, because I was asked to make an edition work by Graphic Studio in Tampa, and they wanted something on a table, and I was like, I don't make stuff on tables, so I'm a little bigger. So I kind of talked them into, and it was a bronze. So I'd worked with wax and never with bronze, as you need your own foundry. So I thought, well, I can figure something out, but then now I started to kind of have to be confronted with like the longer history of bronze sculpture, monumental sculpture, statuaries, and things on pedestals. And I went to school in Richmond, so there are a lot of these big bronze equestrian sculptures everywhere. And anyway, so when I was thinking about kind of monumentality and scale, and like I had this problem because my work is intimate, it's small when you zoom in, but it's big when you see it in the room. But I work in a kind of a small, built-up way. So this was like a real cathedral piece. But I'm conscious of the floor. So this was like a way to kind of make a bigger leap or to rethink the use of the material. So I was thinking about kind of, it didn't seem like a big deal to use a woman's body because that's not my body, but I'm a woman, so I felt like I could, without problem, use it. So, but I also was kind of thinking about like making this pedestal that looks like it's intended for a standing monumental form, but to have the form kind of be relaxed, maybe too relaxed, and sort of conform to the pedestal.
And because I specialize in dumb questions, can I ask, why is she headless?
Because I'm superstitious. I don't know, my Muslim background. No,
Tell us more.
Ooh, topical. I think in large part because I wasn't looking for like a way to identify the figure. I was really thinking of it as like a landscape, like it went from vertical to horizontal, and thinking about kind of the geometry of the body and the way that the body would sit over, like a kind of soft, contoured, amorphous form, registering against a grid, like a solid mass. So these were the things that I was trying to reconcile, and I didn't really want to introduce like racial features or different, some kind of identifying thing. So that wasn't what was interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little bit superstitious, probably.
Could you explain?
I'm sure it's in there, probably. I don't know.
Could you just articulate the superstition?
Like you're not so. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
It's so much part of our culture.
It is so much part of our culture. It
But
is.
not the religion.
It's not a religion.
Religion does not believe in any mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
Our
it's the
cultures are
culture,
very
yes.
superstitious.
Well, yeah, it is. But like when I was,
Could you
13,
articulate for us what
Well,
exactly the superstition is?
I don't know, like being, making these. It's like iconoclastic, sort of.
It's
I don't
something
know.
like
You're
Navrat-
afraid that it's gonna come to life.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. No, I don't believe it.
Interesting.
But I had a very, but no, I mean, my experience of Islam growing up in Ohio was, some of my mom's more like religious friends saw me like doing little portraitures and stuff when I was 13, and they're like, that's haram. You're not supposed to like represent the human form because that's more about living forms, Abstraction was fine, but I mean, I didn't pay attention to it, and I think they were kind of, just, there's a lot of different thoughts on it. Mm-hmm. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for indulging me. Let's see. All four of us are immigrants. I'm British and Canadian. And I actually often relish my sense of estrangement. And when art students kind of ask me at the end of their BAs what they should do next, I often tell them to move abroad, to deep dive into a foreign country and get outside the box of their own culture. And I think a lot of artists with international reputations have actually spent long periods of time betwixt and between cultures. Of course, immigration can be a very brutal experience. And I'm just wondering, how has immigration or being a foreigner or coming from a family that's so different from your friends at high school, affected your sense of self and your work over the years?
Me?
Yeah.
Well,
She
I
always
came
looks
here,
like I'm torturing her.
I came here, I didn't immigrate in that sense. My family stayed in Pakistan. My father was born in South Africa, so he also left South Africa at a young age. And then, and it took us traveling from a young age. So the idea of going somewhere else and, to broaden yourself was very much instilled in me and my brother. And when I was young, I was told that, the Prophet said that if you have to go to China to educate yourself and to broaden your horizons, and China was considered very far away.
I think you have to plug that back in, perhaps.
Oh, the battery came out.
Can we have some assistance up here?
Here.
Thanks.
So,
Because we're recording, we might as well. Have you got that?
Can you hear me now? Yes.
I don't think it's on. Try again.
Sorry
Try
about that.
again.
Hello?
Speak.
Okay, so yeah, when I was young, I was told that that's what the Prophet had, one of his sayings, which is called hadith, is that if you have to go till China, because obviously from Arabia to go to China in that time was considered like, so that's what he said. It's like travel as far as you have to get your life's learning experience. So. I mean, I was very excited about, leaving home just like everybody is to go and study somewhere else, and especially art and just focus on that. So,
It's interesting because when I first saw your work, I assumed you were an artist of African descent, and especially with the totemic figures. And I only just learned that your father was from South Africa.
yes, but he was Indian.
He was Indian.
Yeah.
I wonder, actually, my theory, I developed it yesterday as I was falling asleep, which is, African Americanness is kind of like has been historically in America like the ultimate other. And perhaps only recently have Muslims been positioned as a kind of ultimate other within American culture. And I wondered if there wasn't a sense of identification with the kind of some of the aesthetic forms coming out of that culture rather than Indian or Pakistani culture.
No, I mean, I look at all kinds of sculpture. So I don't have any sort of favorites. I mean, in every ancient form of sculpture, there's something that I can take from there. And that's what I do. So with African sculpture, I remember seeing a show at the old New Museum in the 90s when it was on Broadway. There was an amazing show, and that was the first time I had, face-to-face saw, all those power figures, and in real life seeing so many. I was blown away by them, and then
What was the show?
it keeps.
Do you remember the show name?
I don't
Oh,
remember the
okay.
name of the
I
show,
was curious.
but one can look at. But
Yeah.
this was before the new museum moved to the Bowery. So, and because I'm interested in figuration, and always trying to explore new materials, and so I look at everything, and there's no hierarchies. So, and I get from anything, something that that I can include to my language. That's what that's my sort of goal, So it's not because I'm trying to stay away from one thing and sort of move into the other. It's purely because I want to be as good as I can be, So I have to have a lot of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Layla, let's see, you represent, now help me with my pronunciation, Ghada Amr,
Ghada Amr in Dubai, yes.
and she is an Egyptian artist.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the output of artists who stay in their homeland versus the output of those in the diaspora. And one thing you mentioned to me was a certain kind of conflict between artists who stay in their homelands and those that move abroad in terms of a kind of battle of authenticity.
Well, Ghada, when she moved from Cairo to Nice, she felt a lot of prejudice as a artist, as a woman. So a lot of her work is about that suffering that ended up, affecting her as a human being and as a woman. So she basically, started, mostly her work is about sexuality of a woman. And she's very much a feminist, and she's very outspoken. And she was very funny when I said, okay, Ghada, we're going to do this show in Dubai. I said, I really would like to do it, but I'm not going to change my art. And I said, well, no, nobody's asking you that. But then what are you going to do about my vaginas and my, breasts, and everything is in my sculptures and paintings? And and ceramics. And I said, you just do whatever you're doing. No changes. She said, what if they confiscate them? I said, that has changed. Because yes, indeed, the first few Art Dubais we did,
There was censorship.
there was censorship. And then we
Often
all
around
protested.
flags, strangely. It was kind of around politics more than gender.
No, gender. I
gender.
remember once, it was very funny because I remember the gallery next to me was Ayam Gallery, and they had these huge, huge sculptures of Nadim Karam, a Lebanese artist, and it showed clearly the vagina and the penis. So it was a man and a woman, Adam and Eve. That was the title of the work. And before the fair started, that was the main thing in their booth. I saw them on trolleys and being pushed by 20 men away. And I went to, the owner of the gallery, said, what's going on? I said, well, they put a no on it. Later, I found out that Sheikh Mohammed bought them. And that's the ruler of Dubai. But, I mean,
He showed them at the fair, only in
Didn't show
the
them at the
privacy
fair.
of his own home.
in my own booth the same year. Then they came and I said, where is this one painting? There was 3 paintings. I'd given a little tiny room within my booth to this Turkish artist whose the women were in either their breasts were showing or bikinis. And, like swinging from trees and this and that. So, and there was stitching in the work, and so that she wanted to bring attention to the traditional Turkish stitching, rug making, tapestries, all that. But then she also, Turkey was so open before Erdogan, and Bodrum and all the coast, you saw topless women, you saw everything. So she sort of wanted to bring that attention that there is a little bit of an Islamic trend starting. And so they confiscated they censored one of my paintings and they didn't bring it to my booth. I showed the other 2. And Sheikh Zayed, who you've met, young, the young one who went to St. Andrews and is very young, he came to my booth and said, where is that painting? I saw it in the catalog, and I want that. And he bought it without seeing. Things have changed since then. And in a gallery, you can do what you want. And even those days, I remember Isabel van der Neyden called me one day. She represents the Harizadeh brothers who you interviewed, and said, you need to send me every catalog I've sent you because they burned my catalogs. So that has changed completely. And it's wonderful to see this change going towards more and more, And for me, I must say, I mean, as a woman, as an Iranian Persian woman in America, I suffered a lot of prejudice when the revolution happened. I, first of all, was in the last year of my graduate school, and I had come to New York and was having dinner with Maurice Tuckman, who at the time was a LACMA curator, Noguchi and Arbi Kitai in Nicola's. And
Nice dinner.
somebody from the bar came to the restaurant and said, Khomeini has landed in Iran. So, and I remember and then I had no passport. I didn't see my parents for almost 3 years. Money became an issue. Everything was frozen. And my parents, thank God, my father had a heart attack, not that thank God, but he was in a hospital in Geneva. So thank God they didn't have to be killed not my mother, but my father, like many other people who were part of the industry, banking and all that. Because everybody of that position, whether you're related to the royal family or not, was called a spy. Why? Because a successful business in Iran needed investors from, like my father had this bank, Irano-British Bank. Our partner was the Standard Chartered Bank of England. So that meant, we're funneling money out. So let's confiscate everything they have and close everything they have. And, but all passports were, to this day, I don't have an Iranian passport, I have an American passport. But if you have to go to Iran as an ex-Iranian, you need to have an Iranian passport, Islamic with a chador, So, and I refused to do that. So anyhow, there was a lot of prejudice, because then the hostages happened. It was horrible. I mean, I remember once I was in a taxi in Washington, on the highway, the taxi driver threw me out. So I don't want you to be in my car. And, so I went through a lot. I mean, I was lucky because I had taken a graduate school course at Brown on Mondrian, and Lisa Dennison is in my class. And she had just joined Diane Waldman, who was the curator at the Guggenheim, as her assistant, and I went and worked with them. For 2.5 years, I stayed at the Guggenheim. The Lawson Johnstons, who, part of the Guggenheim family, they really took me in as a, homeless person. not, sort of not homeless, but in a sense, they became my family. So I felt a lot of prejudice then. And then now I feel it again. It's very bizarre. I even changed the name of an artist who I represented, YZ Kami. His name was Kamran Yousefzadeh. It was during the hostages. How can you have a name like Kamran Yousefzadeh? We're not going to sell anything. So I changed his name to the initials of his last name, YZ Kami. It's stuck on him. He's with Gagosian now in New York and
Just like Cary Grant,
I show him in Dubai. But it's
need a
like,
stage
you
name.
had to. It was, at the beginning, I was very proud of my heritage, and I talked about it, and then I got a lot of prejudice against me. It changed slowly,
And do you feel like just skipping forward to the present day and the discourse of the White House and our general political climate around the Muslim ban and things like that, that it's affected the careers of your artist or your sales or?
Big time. I mean, right now, I used to have several artists sold out always. Now, literally, I was talking to Sue about it. People walk in. There's a lot of prejudice against Middle Eastern artists. I thank God, show also a lot of Western artists, but there's a tremendous prejudice, and people are not buying those artists. And thank God one sort of, and on those days, it didn't sell either. There was prejudice against, the hostages or whatever else. Then it changed. I showed Munir Farmayan in 74. Didn't sell one work. She now is with Third Line, and she has a Guggenheim show, and sold out artist the whole time. That has changed for artists. So that's great. And I did a show that really put my gallery on the map in 84. What had happened I showed Munir Farmayan in 84 as well, not 74. I was in college then. So Jeffrey Deitch had sold his apartment in Mott Street, and I didn't live in my gallery, but I had a room there because it was sort of like one of those spaces that you had to also live in. So I kept a room there with clothes in it and stuff. And he came for 6 months until he moved to his new place and lived behind my gallery. He discovered all these calligraphy artists of the Middle East. So we did a show together, and he was beginning to work with graffiti artists. So we did a show called Cali Graffiti, 120 artists. He brought in 60 graffiti artists. I brought in all the calligraphy artists from the Middle East, who now are some big names, and Zawuki, and Twombly, and Toby, and Torres Garcia, and Masson, and Michaud, Mathieu, all these artists. And it was a really cool show. And we did a party at Area for 3,000 people. That changed my life.
We're going to open up to questions in a moment, but just final questions for Diane and Huma. How have you experienced the past 7-8 months, the discourse, political discourse in America right now? How has it affected your mission in the studio, or or your perception of other people's work? It's kind of hard to escape.
You go. I'm going to offend a few people here. My experience is with kind of constant sense of bile in my mouth. It's disgusting. I'm horrified by the Trump administration, as most people, I think, are in the art world. I don't know, maybe not, but I just think let's just, okay, so,
You're amongst
I'm
friends.
not a fan.
Yeah.
It makes me sick. Has it affected me directly if I boil it down? No, I don't think so. Like, not on a, like, I still making a living, like, luckily, I'm still, I don't know, like, I haven't been, I wasn't traveling during the Muslim ban, so nothing happened to me. But certainly, like, the Syrian refugee community in Ohio, you know, I hear stories, and my mom and her friends are constantly collecting clothes and donations to help them settle. And but me, no. Like I'm you know I live in New York, and I'm still. You know, I don't know that it's going to affect me until maybe a few years. I don't know. Like, who knows the impact? Like, psychologically, that's a different story. Like, it's upsetting to, hear every day there's some new kind of prejudice or something going on that's totally irrational. And I guess, how has it changed my work? Like, I've always kind of been negotiating this sort of difficult place where, I first identify as an artist, I think as most artists do, before I identify as a woman, a Syrian, or an Arab, before I think about all these other things, I'm an artist. That's my community, globally. That's who I can go anywhere and I find artists and we relate, and that's fine. But it's a little tricky because, so growing up in Ohio, I pass. Like, no one knows I'm an Arab, really. I don't wear hijab. I'm not. No one knows I grew up as a Muslim. So I hear things, but and that's kind of, I get to actually be a spy. So I can hear what people say when they don't know that I'm an other. But I grew up with this, a very different experience in my home. So I know both worlds. I know I can blend in to the average American, middle America community, and I go back to Ohio, and I have friends that are Trump supporters, and I love them dearly, and it's hard, but, because if we kind of pull back and look at the abstract, we have a lot of conflicting ideas. But the Ohio way is just to relate one-to-one and have a nice day and show your love, and they're good people. I mean, they really are. Like, I grew up with wonderful, wonderful middle American people who are, I don't know, it's so complicated. You really can't boil it all down. Like, I'm not, to kind of make these broad stereotypes. Like, I have Republican friends and family, and I don't have issues with Republicans. Like, I mean, I don't agree with, I'm a Democrat, I don't agree with their positions, but I'm not, this is going off topic.
There's quite a big difference between Republicans
Trump.
and Donald Trump.
So that's my
Very different. I'm a Republican.
huge difference, yeah. And I get along with, Republicans all over the world. I have no issue. I mean, ideologically, I have differences, like I said. So I'm an open Democrat. But Trump is a different thing. Totally different beast. And that's where I get upset. Like, that's a whole other thing. So for me, I've always been like, okay, how much do people need to know about my biography? And how much do they just need to because every time I make something, of course, people are, who is this person? Oh, she has an Arabic last name, and she's a woman, and she's young, or whatever. Like, all these things come to mind about who I am, and that's natural, and that's normal, and I actually appreciate it. I think it's fine. But no matter what I make, I think that comes up.
Homa.
Well, I'll say that the stupidity and incompetence of Trump is extremely shocking and disappointing, obviously, because one would think that, we're supposed to move forward. But at the same time, I also think that, things don't happen in 7 months. There's obviously I mean, in my mind, I think, like even when the demonization of Islam as a violent religion of fanatical people, it all started, I think, from after the
Crusades?
The first Gulf War, which was considered okay, but for me, that was just the beginning of, I mean, I didn't expect that we'd be in a 16-year war now, still ongoing, but at that time in 92, I remember I was working for this artist, Meyer Weissman, and in New York, and the troops came back, and there was all this cheering and yellow ribbons, and they were walking down the streets. I could see them from the window, and I mean, there was dread, that this is just the beginning. Even though I had no idea what was actually how it was gonna play out, but. I think just, because I come from a place when, the Russians invaded Afghanistan, which is a neighbor of Pakistan. We got 3 million refugees, and the climate of Pakistan completely changed because the Americans came in because they also wanted to make sure that they have their presence. So, I mean, I think these things are more complicated. I mean, he's like bringing out all the bad traits that I don't think any culture or any country would want to, have those qualities be out in the front, and all these, all the stuff that you think you've sort of gone beyond, but then suddenly it's like, no, we'll just shut everything down, and in the end, it's not going to be helpful because, I don't think it's because, he's not really doing anything in terms of increasing anything locally. So it's more of a personal gain, but we'll see what happens. But, I think cultures build upon other cultures, and especially coming from an older place, it's like, places are destroyed, and then civilizations are destroyed, and then the next one comes along, builds right on top of that, and then, so they take from other things. So, and, personally, I don't think it has affected me. I live in Trump country, upstate New York, and he even came to Poughkeepsie, which was, to his benefit because he made the rounds. And, but I mean, yeah, I mean, these kind of things, these have to do with foreign policy, which is a whole other discussion. So,
It is, but at the same time, yes. I mean, for instance, a reason why I became a Republican at the time was because Carter, who had no international knowledge of, the knowledge of international diplomacy, made a wrong bet on Iran in a sense, and that's what really did change the dynamics of the region. So as you said, the Russians came to Afghanistan. They would have never dared had the Iran, who had American bases in Iran, that would have never happened. Israel and Iran had the biggest trade together, so that disappeared. So much happened, and Saudi became stronger. And why, when 9/11, 14 of the terrorists were Saudis, 2 were Emiratis. None were Iranian, Syrian, Libyan,
Iraqi.
Afghani, Pakistani, none of them from nowhere else. None of these countries have ever given terrorists. It's always Pakistanis, Saudis who finance this whole thing. And the whole deal with Trump is money, it's oil, it's a trade. So it has nothing to do with religion in a sense, as they say. It has to do with oil. It's always been oil,
and arms.
And arms. It's all about that at the end of the day. And, the region has become a mess and chaos and, and suddenly, and also the lack of knowledge. If you read Le Monde or if you listen to the French TV or even English TV, you hear another version than what you hear in America. Because at the end, it's everybody in America thinks we're terrorists. Like, literally. So I sent an e-blast about a Middle Eastern artist, Arab or Iranian or wherever they're from, Pakistani. I do represent 3 artists from Pakistan. And people write me, these are friends of mine. They've gone to Princeton, Harvard, you name it. And they write me, why are you showing terrorist art? I mean, so it's what we're fed by the media and all that. So
I want to say, too, I feel like this was a complicated panel.
Very, and I'm grateful for you all talking about very difficult subjects that are close to your heart. And I do want to open it up to the audience, okay? So, show of hands, we have 2 mics we'd like to record because for posterity. And come on, I know someone's got a comment or a question. Thank you.
Yeah, first, I would like 2 questions, really. Well, 3. I don't understand why anybody thinks Layla isn't an American. She looks perfectly American to me. But mainly, I don't know if you're all citizens of this country, and if you are, how being an American and selling mainly, I think, or appealing mainly maybe to American audiences has affected what you plan to make and actually how it comes out.
Yeah, who would like to take that question?
I mean, I don't believe in nationalism, and I'm just an artist, and artists go to different places so where they have the best company so that they can make the best work, and so I don't think about those things when I'm making my work, and I think, most of the time I'm just sort of, making sculpture. I'm not a political artist, so things sometimes come out looking a certain way, and that's just because I'm aware of what's going on, but it's not, I'm not working on certain issues intentionally. I don't want to, that's not what I do.
I feel that I want to bring awareness to my fellow countrymen in Iran. I do a lot of fundraisers for Senator Schumer, Carolyn Maloney. I'm a New Yorker, obviously, that's why. And others even Senator Flake, who now from Arizona, who is a Republican but so against this government. I've also done something for him, for Senator Gillibrand. So, and the reason why I do that, I'm not a political person either, but I do it to bring awareness and and have a voice in Congress. I also show very, very political artists, hence why I'm scared to go back to Iran. And the ones who are in the diaspora, I empower them, and a lot of my artists are very much against the current Iranian regime. And I also show, the Harizadeh brothers, for instance, that you mentioned. When they lived in Iran, all their work was in metaphors and symbolism. Whereas now that they live in Dubai, they can openly express their, they did the same thing, but in metaphors and symbolism. Like, for instance, I went to an opening at the Tadeusz Ropak Gallery, and they had a show. And I said to Ramin, what is this Indian headdress on this character? Why an Indian headdress? It's really the empress with her crown, except I can't show her like that in Iran. And actually, they were
Because the Shah's wife often wears a
or did in ceremonial
turban.
things, yes. So, but Shoja, Azari Shirin Nishad's husband, and Shirin Shoja, very outspoken. I show these artists. And so that's how I, as an American, try to, make a dent if I can.
I'd like to interrupt for a moment just to say, please put up your hand and we'll pass you a mic, and then when there's an opening, you can speak, and we'll speed things along that way. So if anyone would like to ask a question before, okay, so let's take a mic down there while Diana fields that question. Did you have a response to?
I'm an American.
I mean, you have, there is a lot of support in America for your work. Do you feel like it comes from diaspora Arabs who are particularly, like who are Arab Americans, let's say?
I don't know. I mean-
Are there, do you have a sense of where it comes from?
I think it's a pretty big mix. I have a lot of European collectors, and I think now a lot of Middle Eastern collectors as well, and a lot of American. I don't know that that's super. Maybe my gallerist would know,
Maybe
but I don't know if
Jeannie
it's
can-
super important to.
Sorry, Marianne.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know if it's super important to my collectors to know that I'm Syrian or if it matters.
I think it breaks down into two, there's groups that.
Sorry, Marianne Boski, Diana's
Hi. I would
dealer.
say that there are people that are not consciously looking for that as a background to inform the work. They just are attracted to it from a formal and aesthetic reason. But having also done the fair in Dubai and spent some time in the Middle East showing your work, there's very much a support group out there of collectors and institutions and curators who want to get behind Middle Eastern artists and make sure that their work is being seen. So it can go either way. I think, for Diana, your work it has elements in architecture and abstraction. Rarely, once in a while, there's also figuration. So it really is different people are attracted to different aspects of the work for different reasons.
Question right at the back.
Yeah, I know a lot of you come from cultures that have a long history, and my husband's Bosnian, and so when and I'm from Indiana, so I'm trying to explain to my family and friends about what happened in Yugoslavia, and I find, I just wanted to ask your advice or opinion, like what kind of forums do you use to talk about history? Because I know you spoke about, the history of Iran, and I feel like a lot of times when you come from another culture that you have to pause and be like, well, this is what really happened. For in Yugoslavia, I have to, in Sarajevo, I have to explain it's a cosmopolitan city and it's not, people, we have a perception in the US as people being primitive who come from a conflict country. Or I have Palestinian female friends who are very cosmopolitan that never get any media attention, and it's always painted as primitive. But then, how do you choose art as your forum? Do you choose
I was gonna
articles?
say, yeah, I have two forums that I use to discuss history, I guess you said. One's my work, and the other is myself, I guess. And that was kind of what I was about to say. This is a complicated panel because I don't tend to gravitate towards things that discuss my biography. It's not terribly interesting to me. But when I say myself as a form, I think it's useful for people to see what a Arab woman looks like because they look like me. I'm one of many kinds of Arab women. So for that reason, I think just sitting here is maybe useful for this audience or whoever might watch this in the future. You can just educate them to just tell them to read a book. I don't know. There's so much information out there. It's like kind of on them if they don't I don't know. I mean, I don't realize the depth and the complexities of different cultures. I think that's the most painful thing. For me about the Trump administration is the flattening of identities around the world. And Muslims are 25% of the world population. And there are Muslims in China, and there are Muslims in Iran, there are Muslims in America, there are Muslims in South America, and they're everywhere. And they look different, and they have different cultures and different histories, and they look like you and me, and some of them don't. And some of them wear all black abayas, and some of them walk around, practicing and very, my mom looks a lot like me, and she's a Muslim. She follows her faith. But she looks like your average, middle American, Ohio flower shop owner.
That's the beauty of America.
It's a beautiful world, the world is complicated. Yes, it's true, it's true.
But I think the best way to, you should take your family to Bosnia, No, because my husband is American, and He came, it's been, when you were 25, I took you there. You'd never been to that part of the world. It was a shock, but it was a good shock. You know? I mean, you understand things only when you experience them.
Or when you meet someone.
Yeah.
You know, so
I
if
mean,
they can't
yeah.
travel to Bosnia, they can meet a Bosnian.
Well, you have to try, you know.
Yeah.
But
So
this
that's-
only happens in America, and that's the beauty of it. My
Yeah.
husband is Jewish American. His mother's family's, all perished in Auschwitz. I mean, it's great that we can be in this country and be together.
Yeah, for sure.
Other questions?
Hi, and thanks for being here today. I have a quick question, I think, for Huma, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm curious as to how large your totem pole sculptures are, and if you know how large they're going to be before you begin.
Well, I have to prepare the column, before I carve them, so I have to make that decision. So they are between 6 and, usually around 6 feet, 72, 74 inches. And then the larger ones go up to 8 feet tall, yeah. And they, are about, they could be 18 inches square or 24 inches,
A question right in the front row here.
Hi, thank you. I was just in Burlington, Vermont, where you have an exhibition up, and I was thinking as I was in the space at the Burlington Center for the Arts about the audience having no clue about you. There's a small bio, but they were engaging with your work on an aesthetic and emotional level, and it was
how I
really
reeled them in.
amazing. It is, it was amazing, so I
Thank
just
you.
want to congratulate you for that. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Other questions? One more? Well, I have one, if no one else has one. I mean, one of the things that I felt in interviewing artists in the Middle East, and especially at Art Dubai or Sharjah Biennial, where you have this huge gathering of artists from kind of many different cultures who tend to have in common the fact that they're of Muslim descent or come from predominantly Muslim countries. And one thing I found is that there is a much greater tendency to have political readings of the work and to politicize the work than there is in America. So just going back to a slide back here, like someone like Etel Adnan, who's a Lebanese artist, the abstract painting on the right, you would think, oh, well, what's political about that? But when you think about the kind of contestation around land in Lebanon, throughout the period of her working life, there are many who would give a very political reading to her painting. And I think looking at work through a political filter seems actually much more common almost anywhere outside of America than in America. And there's a kind of very strong rule around like sticking to the form and just discussing the form. And even if there's a kind of subliminal political content that works into the work, even artists kind of repress it, or if they acknowledge it, they don't necessarily want to talk about it in public. I was wondering if any of you had thoughts on that.
I mean, it just depends on where you're from, right? And what your experience, I don't know. It's all personal. I mean, is that right? Did it take her 50 years to make that?
Sorry, no, it didn't take her 50 years to do that. That is from a series of paintings done between 1959 and 2010. And unfortunately, I couldn't find the exact part of the painting. But she worked in that format
Okay.
of these small abstracted landscapes. I mean, she was very much a colorist, and she did that series of paintings for that many years. So my apologies, I couldn't find the exact date of the work.
Sorry, that's all I could think about.
Well, to the left of that
sorry,
work
yeah.
was Shiva Ahmadi. This work is in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. She also won the Pollock Krasner Prize, and she's in 18 other American museums. But if you look at it at first hand, you look beautiful, Persian miniature, how beautiful it is. If you really go and look in the details, you see the mosque, the ruler, which is a mullah with his turban, and blood everywhere, and the nuclear plants in the background, and the mosques that are becoming a front for nuclear plants, and what's going on supposedly in Iran. So there's so much political content in this work. And a lot of blood. I mean, I remember in Art Dubai, people would come by, this is beautiful. I wish artists would paint more like this and not be so political. But there were bullet holes in the oil barrel with blood dripping out. They wouldn't see that. Or, you know, they would look at this and they thought it was beautiful, how wonderful. But there's so much violence and terror behind the work. And she was so traumatized by the Iran-Iraq war, so.
I also think even when you say you're not a political artist, I think you mean you're not kind of coming forward with a, you know, predetermined political message. But I think really all art is political. Like everything you do, every choice you make is political. I think everyone knows that or can understand that maybe. So, but the degree to which, you know, you want to kind of look through whatever that lens is probably based on your experience as a viewer. So, you know, it's going to vary, I guess.
Any last words from you, Huma?
I think that, you know, the fact that we have Trump as a president, it definitely has changed things in terms of people have sort of woken up a little bit. And like, you know, I mean, to the reality of him being around for 4 years. But I think that previously it wasn't so much like that. There's a lot more people speaking out. And I think even with the healthcare bill, who was going to their town hall meetings before, you know, and all this stuff is happening. So
A general politicization of American culture.
Exactly, which is what you started the question with, that why is it not, but I think the younger generation obviously realizes that their futures are dependent on becoming more aware of what is happening around them, you know, because it's not so, things are not going to be good, but they can change if it starts at the grassroots level, so.
Well, I want to thank.
I want to just finish with a tiny funny anecdote, which has nothing to do with our talk. But since it happened in Aspen in 1979, I thought I would share it with you. So I was skiing, down. It was the last run. I stopped in for a hot chocolate, and there was a guy sitting there having his hot chocolate alone. He sort of came and said, "May I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And he said, we start talking, "Where are you from?" "I'm Persian originally, and now this revolution has happened, da, da, da." So then he said, "Well, can we have drinks tonight together?" I had a boyfriend in New York, so I said, "No, thank you, but thank you. See you later." Skied down the mountain. So 2 days later, I'm skiing down, and this guy who I didn't know who he was at the beginning, but he started waving to me and saying, "Khomeini." He probably forgot my name, Layla. "Khomeini, hi. When are you going to have drinks with me?" And I literally went home. I was staying with a friend. I went under my covers. I cried so much. I said, "Is this going to be my future? Khomeini, person who ruined my life?" And then 2 nights later, I met him. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's a great story.
He wasn't married. I wasn't married. So
Wow.
anyhow, to end our talk, I thought I should share this
That's
anecdote.
hysterical. It was one of his best.
Only Scrubgrass and Aspen. Thank you so much to Anderson Ranch for hosting such an interesting and difficult conversation. Thank you.
Oh my God.
What would you like? Was it your type? Thank you, Sarah.
He was in this, he doesn't like this.
I've got a ring. Okay. I'm going to
years later. I know this guy. Oh, my God. Great, great.
That was really interesting, I thought.